It is rivalry week across the country and in the SEC, and despite both divisions being wrapped up, this is something special. We bring in Peter Burns from the SEC Network. Peter, take your choice here. I don't know where we go with this because there are good games all over the place, and even though they, in a sense, don't mean anything, you might want to say, wow, I want to see LSU and Texas A&M because there's going to be athletes all over the field. Of course, I want to see the Iron Bowl. Florida State, after Jim McElwain gave that very emotional plea after the game, and he's so proud of his Gators coming through at LSU. So a lot of good storylines, but let's start with the obvious, and Bama trying to complete the quest for a national championship. Do you give Auburn a puncher's chance in this one?
Well, I mean, the thing that's important here is that they're going to get Cam Petway back. And, I mean, he was such an integral part in October. I mean, almost 200 yards a game. And as much as I love Kerryon Johnson, it was really that 1-2 punch that really made them a little bit more formidable. The big question that Gus Malzahn wouldn't answer earlier this week for us was who's going to be a starting quarterback. I mean, we saw the shocker of Jeremy Johnson getting back in and playing because John Franklin III has just continued to struggle in the passing game. So, I mean, I think they're going to hope that Sean White can go. But ultimately, I just I can't find a roadmap for the Auburn Tigers to score. And that's the problem against everybody, or everybody's having with Bama, right? Like, you know, no matter how good you run the ball, and Auburn's run it, for 400 plus in 4 games. I mean, that's out of control. They just shut people down. So compare, you know, you're not going to have Sean White 100% even if he does go. I just don't see a way that a team like Auburn right now can put more than 14 points up on the board against Alabama.
Exactly. That's the thing, because we can, I think, both find hope on the other side of the ball because the Auburn defense has been very close to what we saw LSU do against Bama. So maybe that's the formula on that side of the ball. Maybe they can pull off what LSU did for close to 4 quarters in a scoreless game. But offensively, it's tough to find any hope there. Florida State, the Gators, it's the same story all throughout the season, but it equals an SEC Eastern Division championship. It doesn't always look impressive, but hey, they made the big goal line stand against LSU, and they are in a good position.
Three goal line stands, which is just absolutely crazy. And I was texting to a couple of my buddies, tonight about the LSU opening job, and we kind of came to the conclusion that LSU fans, if they really want Jimbo Fisher, they're actually pulling for Florida this week. You know, I mean, and that hurts LSU fans because they don't ever want to have to pull for the Florida Gators. But, they're hoping that LSU has made an offer to Jimbo Fisher and that Jimbo could lose that game and maybe say, hey, listen, it's time for me to go out and join the SEC. And so I think there's a lot of LSU fans that are going to be watching that one, hoping that Jim McElwain plays just as good a defense they did against the Tigers as they do the Seminoles.
The possibility's minuscule, but while we're all focusing on like the top 6 or 8 teams in the country, Florida's got a path to the national championship. It's like, you know, an impossible barrier, even if they beat Florida State, but it's still a path.
Well, but think about LSU after they lost to Arkansas in 2007. I mean, they lost in triple overtime as the number 1 team in the country, and this is back in the BCS. So they had to have just a crazy situation happen in Championship Saturday the week after, and about 15 things fell their way, and sure enough, they played for a national championship and won one. So, yeah, I mean, it would require them beating Florida State, and then shocking the world by beating Alabama in the SEC championship game, and they would need a lot of help. But if you go back and look at it, and that's what me and Feinbaum and the guys were talking about on SEC Now yesterday, is if you have an SEC champion Florida, and they just ended the year with beating LSU at LSU, beating FSU at FSU, and then beating the number 1 team in the country that's probably undefeated at a neutral site, how do you not say that is not the best 2-team loss? Because we've always talked about, well, what happens when you lose late, right? A late loss can hurt you, but what about really good late wins? I don't think we've ever really talked about, hey, how can a team just go and be incredible late in the season and say maybe they didn't gel until a little bit later? They don't do it in very pretty style football, just like last year, but still, W's a W.
Yeah, winning the SEC should pretty much cement that. But then you cap it off with the Florida State win, too.
Right.
And it's extremely impressive. So the ACC has somehow won these games against the SEC late in the season, but as I like to remind people, we're talking about top tier teams in the SEC, in the ACC, i.e., Clemson in particular, but even the
Right.
rest of these teams going up against lower tier teams in the SEC. So you can't look at the record there, but out of the rest of these matchups, ACC, SEC, what jumps out at you? What do you like?
Well, I mean, honestly, the Clemson-South Carolina game is intriguing. I mean, last year Clemson was the number one team in the country, and South Carolina was pathetic. I mean, they were really, really bad. And that game was a one-score game going late into the fourth quarter. I mean, Clemson barely won that one, 37-32. So this is a much better South Carolina team. Now, they're going into Death Valley, not the real one, not the real Baton Rouge Death Valley, but the one in Clemson. But they it will be intriguing because with Jake Bentley, that team has found something. They've won 4 of their last 5 games, and they've won 5 out of the last 7 against Clemson. So Muschamp has got those guys fired up. Rico Dowdle, the running back, has been solid too. So and that defense, the thing is that they can contain Deshaun Watson. They've got a shot. Now that's easier said than done, but I don't think they're going to run the ball a lot with Deshaun just because they want to make sure he's healthy for the last couple of games of the season as well too. So the big disadvantage that South Carolina has is secondary. They are really struggling secondary wise.
I made the comment a couple weeks ago that outside of Auburn, and this is before the Tigers lost to Georgia, that South Carolina had overachieved more than any school in the SEC. And
they're playing with house money.
Losing,
absolutely playing with house money.
yeah, exactly. It's 6-6, even if they lose to the number 3 team in the country, and they go to a bowl game in Will Muschamp's first year. Win-win situation, and he's developing a quarterback at the same time. So, Peter, before we leave, to relax a little bit tonight, let's get your take on the Egg Bowl. And unfortunately, it's a negative slant because these are 2 programs that have risen, especially Ole Miss in recent years, and actually been in contention in the SEC West. But a down year for both the Bulldogs and the Rebels, and it reminds me of when I covered Mississippi football a couple decades ago and going to these games that didn't mean a whole lot, but possibly jobs on the line and the future of both programs.
Yeah, I mean, I think the future, it's just kind of how, both of these guys, they're going to be able to look back at this year and say one thing. One of these teams is going to be able to say we won the Egg Bowl. That's basically the only good thing that's going to come from either of these squads. So I think jobs are safe. I mean, I think what this does for both coaches is it like they have been doing so great lately between Freeze and Mullen that it says, okay, now let's not make this a pattern. This may make this, the exception to what's been going on with their respective programs. But listen, I really like Nick Fitzgerald. I think he is. I think he can play. The problem is Mississippi State just didn't have the Jimmies and Joes this year, especially on the defensive side. So I think the difference with that game is being in Oxford. I think they just have in Ole Miss too many playmakers. I think Shea Patterson's going to be able to have some fun against that Mississippi State defense. And I look for Evan Ingram to have a big game. I think it was an absolute travesty that he was not on the John Mackey tight end award finalist list. I mean, basically they said that he splits out too much to be a tight end, but listen, he's always been listed as a tight end. I've seen him block. He is a tight end. He'll play tight end on the next level, but I expect for Shea and Evan Ingram to have quite a 1-2 punch, and it'd be good for Evan Ingram to have a monster day in the Egg Bowl.
If we're still calling Jimmy Graham a tight end, we can do the same for Evan Ingram.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Rob Gronkowski is a fullback/linebacker who plays like a wide receiver. So yeah, that's definitely a hybrid. And I'm actually shocked too that tight end play has not really risen to the level in the SEC as it has in the NFL. I think that's where you could really have the biggest mismatches. And we've seen a little bit with Jeremy Sprinkle out at Arkansas. We definitely have seen it with Evan Ingram over there at Ole Miss, and a little bit with O.J. Howard, but not as much as Alabama fans would probably like to have seen. But I really think that's where offensive coordinators really need to take a look at the NFL game and say, if these guys in the NFL have such a big mismatch, and that's why the tight ends work so well, we need to find a way to put that in our offenses. So I think that might be the next thing that a couple of OCs try to get involved in 2017.
I think OJ's just waiting for the national championship game again.
It's unbelievable, right? Like it's almost like a break in case of an emergency type deal, and I truly believe that's the case because I've seen them use OJ Howard in such crucial plays, and it seems like any time Alabama got in trouble, whether it's Ole Miss a couple years ago or LSU games, there's always one or two. Hey, we need to have a big catch. We need 15 to 20 yards. And they run a play where O.J. Howard's wide open. It almost seems like they save that for when they need it. And kudos to Alabama for having a handful of plays that they don't even need the regular season that they can use whenever they want.
So where are you going to be this weekend?
I'm actually back here at the studio, so we'll be working with Texas A&M LSU game and recapping that one, of course, and then going into this last Saturday. It's kind of sad that we're already into the rivalry week. So, by the way, I'm actually happy that we're past rivalry week because it is impossible to say fast. And I've said it 500 times. You nailed it when we started, but I've said it on television 25 times this week, and I've only said it correctly maybe 3 times.
Well, when you're a young broadcaster, you shy away from certain things, and that was probably one of those things for me 20 years ago. Now, hey, whatever. But yeah, if you're going to say it 25 times in a week, there's no doubt any of us are going to trip up on it a couple times.
Well, there's no rivalry week, and you say it. I made Spears do it 3 times fast, and it was a disaster on the show last night. So. Hey man, we're having fun, and there should be hopefully some craziness that goes on. I'm actually kind of curious to see what Kentucky can do against Louisville as well too. And I don't think Louisville is going to be playing for nearly as much as they were, last week when they were still in the college football playoff. So Mark Stoops is another team that's playing with house money, just like South Carolina, because they're headed to a bowl, and who knows what happens. Tennessee, Vandy as well too is interesting to me. So I think Vandy can actually win that game against Tennessee.
Yeah, they've shown us a lot this year, especially in the Plains against Auburn.
Yep.
All right, for college football fans, if you call yourself a college football fan, this is the week for you. It's the week that rivals play.
Hey, you nailed it. Rivalry week. There you go.
All right, Peter Burns from the SEC Network dropping by, always helping us out. Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Mark.